Every year, thousands of young people stand up and say something important. They post it. They march for it. They raise it in a room full of adults who nod politely. And then, nothing changes. Not because the idea was wrong. Often because it never reached the people who actually decide, in a form those people could actually use. Look at these two images. On the left, energy, visibility, emotion. On the right, something quieter. But this is the room where a budget line gets changed, where a program gets funded, where a rule gets rewritten. Both matter. But most young people only ever get taught how to do the thing on the left. This video is about the thing on the right. It's about closing the gap between expression, saying what you feel, and influence, changing what institutions do. And here's the good news. That shift is not luck, and it's not about being well-connected. It's a skill. It can be learned, practiced, and repeated. So over the next 25 minutes, let's learn exactly how dialogue with policymakers works in Europe, the frameworks, the institutions, and the practical moves, so that the next time you have something to say, you also know how to make it land. Here's the journey. First, why youth dialogue is a genuine institutional need, not a nice gesture, but something democracies actually depend on. Then, the difference between dialogue, protest, and consultation, because these are three different tools, and confusing them costs you results. Then we'll look at the framework that holds it all together, the EU Youth Strategy, and the mechanism that turns it into practice, the EU Youth Dialogue. We'll meet the institutions involved, the programs that pay for participation, and the organizations that make it accessible to ordinary young people. And then we get fully practical. How policymakers really work, how to prepare, how to actually get a meeting, how to run it, and how to turn a single conversation into a lasting result. By the end, you'll have a toolkit you can use this month. Let's start with the biggest question of all. Think about how most decisions get made. They affect young people for decades. Education, climate, jobs, housing, mental health. But they're often made by people who won't live with the long-term consequences, and without young people anywhere near the room. That creates a problem that institutions themselves worry about, a gap in legitimacy. Youth dialogue answers three institutional needs at once. And notice, these aren't favors to young people. They're things the system itself needs to function. First, legitimacy. A decision is simply stronger when the people it affects helped shape it. A youth policy written with young people carries democratic weight that the same policy written about them, behind closed doors, never will. Legitimacy is what makes a decision stick. Second, trust. This one is fragile and it's eroding. When young people feel that no one listens, they don't just go quiet. They disengage from the whole system. They stop voting, stop joining, stop believing institutions are for them. But when institutions genuinely listen and respond, that downward spiral can reverse. Dialogue is one of the few things that rebuilds trust rather than burning it. Third, better decisions. This is the most underrated. Young people see problems early and from the ground floor. They notice the bus route that doesn't connect to the college, the mental health waiting list, the app nobody over 40 understands. Their lived experience isn't just emotionally valid. It's information that makes policy more accurate. Skip it, and you legislate with a blind spot. So here's the crucial point. Youth dialogue is not a symbolic, feel-good photo opportunity. Treated seriously, it's a structural response to a real weakness in modern democracy. The risk that decisions drift away from the people they're meant to serve. Frame it that way in a meeting, and you stop sounding like you're asking for a favor and start sounding like you're solving the institution's problem. But there's a catch, and it's an honest one. Dialogue only delivers legitimacy if it's representative. If the only young people in the room are confident, well-resourced, already connected, then the dialogue speaks for a narrow slice and quietly leaves everyone else out. A youth council made up entirely of straight-A students from the city center is not representing the young people who most need to be heard. That challenge, representativeness, is one we'll keep returning to, because it's exactly why intermediary organizations exist. Now, a distinction that will change everything you do. Protest, consultation, and dialogue are three different instruments. They feel similar. They're all having a voice. But they work in completely different ways, and confusing them is one of the most common mistakes in advocacy. Protest is about visibility. It puts an issue onto the public agenda and signals how strongly people feel. Climate strikes are a perfect example. They made it impossible for governments to pretend young people didn't care. Protest is genuinely powerful for getting attention. But on its own, it rarely tells decision-makers what to do next. It creates pressure. It doesn't usually create the solution. Where angry is heard. But here's the specific clause we want changed, is what gets implemented. Consultation is when an institution asks for input. Usually once, usually on its own terms, often through a survey or a call for evidence. You answer the questions they chose to ask. It's genuinely useful. It gets your position on the record, and it's an open door. But notice the limits. It's frequently a one-off. The questions are preset, and the flow of influence runs mostly one way. You respond. You rarely get to redesign the conversation. Dialogue is the different one. Its three defining features are reciprocity, accountability, and continuity. Reciprocity means both sides give and take. It's a real exchange, not a one-way broadcast. Accountability means the institution is expected to respond and to explain what actually happened to your input, what they took, what they didn't, and why. Continuity means it doesn't end after one meeting. It's a relationship that builds over months and years, where trust and track record accumulate. And here's the strategic insight. You don't have to choose just one. The smartest movements use all three. They protest to force the issue onto the agenda and create urgency. They take part in the consultation to get formally on the record. And they build dialogue to actually shape the final outcome behind the scenes. The skill isn't picking a favorite. It's knowing which tool fits which moment and sequencing them. Protest opens the door. Dialogue walks through it. So where does the structure for all this actually come from? At European level, it's the EU Youth Strategy, 2019 to 2027. Think of it as the overarching political framework, the shared agreement across the European Union on how young people should take part in shaping the policies that affect them. It's the constitution, if you like, for youth participation in Europe. The strategy is built around three core areas, and they're worth knowing by name because you'll hear them everywhere. Engage, connect, empower. Engage is about meaningful participation. The key word is meaningful. Not young people invited as an audience to clap at the end, but as genuine partners in democratic life and decision-making. Engage is the commitment that participation should have actual influence, that it's not decoration. When you push for a real seat at the table rather than a token consultation, you are literally asking institutions to honor the engage pillar. Connect is about bringing young people together, across borders, across backgrounds, across the urban-rural divide, through exchange, mobility, and solidarity. Why does this matter for influence? Because isolated voices are weak, and networked voices are strong. A young person alone is easy to overlook. The same young person connected to a movement across 27 countries is not. Connect is what turns individual frustration into collective weight. Empower is about capacity, giving young people the resources, the skills, the information, and the quality youth work they need to actually act. Because here's a hard truth. Telling someone they can participate while giving them no time, no money, no training, and no support is setting them up to fail. Empower is the recognition that participation has real costs, and someone has to invest in making it possible. And here's what matters most for you. This architecture has governance implications. It's not just an inspirational poster. It commits institutions to build real channels for participation and to follow up on what young people say. So when you engage, you're not begging. You're holding institutions to commitments they've already signed up to. The strategy sets the direction. Now let's look at the machine that actually runs it. That machine is the EU Youth Dialogue. If the strategy is the framework, the EU Youth Dialogue is the main participatory mechanism, the actual process that turns those three big words into something young people can join. And the most important thing to understand about it is that it runs in cycles. Each cycle starts with a theme, a priority chosen together with young people, like mental health, or inclusion, or sustainability. Around that theme come the consultations, a wide gathering of input from young people right across Europe, through national events, online platforms, workshops, and activities run on the ground, often in your own country and even your own town. This is the stage where your voice physically enters the system. All of that raw input is then synthesized into concrete recommendations, clear proposals aimed at decision makers. This is the alchemy at the heart of the whole process. Thousands of scattered experiences and frustrations get distilled into a focused set of asks that an institution can actually pick up and act on. This is the moment lived experience becomes policy language. And then comes the stage that separates real dialogue from a glorified survey, political follow-up. Those recommendations don't vanish into a drawer. They feed into institutional discussions at European and national level, and institutions are expected to respond and to report back on what they did with them. Accountability made concrete. Then the whole thing begins again with a new theme. And notice the spiral, not a circle. Each cycle builds on the last. That's the continuity we talked about. Co-creation over time, linking consultation to recommendation to follow up again and again, so relationships and trust accumulate instead of resetting to zero every time. So what makes the cycle actually effective rather than just procedural? 3 things. Consultations that genuinely reach a wide and representative group, not just the usual suspects who always show up. Recommendations that are sharp and usable, not a vague wish list, but proposals specific enough to act on. And follow-up that institutions take seriously enough to answer honestly. When any one of those 3 breaks, the whole mechanism weakens, which is exactly why the people who run these consultations on the ground matter so much. Let's name the players. Because knowing who does what tells you exactly where to push, and stops you wasting energy asking the wrong person for the wrong thing. The European Commission helps drive the policy agenda at EU level, proposes initiatives, and supports the framework and its funding programs. It's a key engine, but it's deliberately at arm's length from any single national government. The Council, where the member states' governments meet, is where political priorities get agreed between countries. When you hear that ministers adopted conclusions on youth, this is the room. It's where national positions meet and turn into shared European direction. National working groups are the real engine room in each country. They typically bring together youth organizations, individual young people, and public authorities, and they coordinate the consultations on the ground. For most young people watching this is your most realistic entry point, far more reachable than Brussels. Find out who runs the national working group in your country, because that's a door that's genuinely open. Youth representatives are the bridge. They carry young people's views into the meetings and processes where decisions take shape and carry information back. They're the ones who make sure that when recommendations are discussed, an actual young person is in the room, not just a summary document. And please don't overlook the local level. Municipalities, regions, and local youth councils are where an enormous amount of real participation actually lives, and where European frameworks either come alive or quietly stall. The mayor's office and the regional council are often where a young person can have the most direct, fastest impact of all. The key idea tying this together is multi-level governance. Influence does not only happen in Brussels. That's a myth that puts people off before they start. A decision can be shaped at European, national, or local level, and very often the local door is the easiest one to open and the one where you'll see results soonest. Start where you can reach. Now, none of this runs on goodwill alone. Participation has real costs: venues, travel, training, staff time, translation. And it needs an enabling ecosystem, funding, capacity, and people who make it accessible. 2 European programs are central to that ecosystem. First, Erasmus Youth. Think of it as the backbone for funding and capacity building. It supports youth exchanges, participation activities, training courses, mobility, and, crucially, the everyday running of the youth organizations that do this work. When a group of young people gets funded to run a participation project, or a youth worker gets trained to facilitate dialogue, that's very often Erasmus Youth underneath. Without that backbone, most participation simply wouldn't happen because someone has to pay for the room and the train tickets. Second, CERV, the Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values Program. This one is complementary, and it works on the wider environment. Where Erasmus Youth builds youth-specific capacity, CERV strengthens the broader democratic soil that participation grows in. Civic engagement, rights, equality, and the shared values that make healthy dialogue possible in the first place. Together, the 2 programs cover both the specific youth pipeline and the general democratic ecosystem around it. But funding and frameworks still need people to connect them to real young people. A grant doesn't reach a shy 16-year-old in a rural town by itself. That's the role of intermediary organizations. And they may be the most underrated part of this entire system. Youth councils, civil society organizations, and facilitators do 3 essential things. They make participation accessible, reaching young people who would never find these processes on their own, translating the intimidating jargon, lowering the barrier to walking in. They make it representative, deliberately bringing in diverse voices, the rural, the working class, the disabled, the disengaged, not just the confident few who always volunteer. And they make it policy relevant, taking raw experiences and frustrations and translating them into the structured language institutions can actually act on. Remember that representativeness problem from earlier? This is the answer to it. Intermediaries are the difference between dialogue that truly speaks for young people and dialogue that only speaks for a lucky, well-connected few. If you want to get involved and you don't know where to start, finding your local youth council or a youth organization is almost always the fastest first step. Now let's flip the camera around entirely and look at the people you're trying to influence. Because if you understand how they actually work and what's stopping them, you'll ask for the right things from the right person in the right way. This is where amateurs and effective advocates really separate. First, competences. Every policymaker can only act within their mandate, their legal lane. A local councillor cannot change European law. A member of the European Parliament does not run your town's youth centre. A health minister can't fix your school timetable. So before you ask yourself, is this person able to deliver what I want? Match your ask to the person who can actually say yes, or you'll get a sympathetic nod and zero change. Second, constraints. Budgets are finite. Laws restrict what's possible. Timing controls everything. And here's the reframe that will save you a lot of heartbreak. When a policymaker says no, it very often doesn't mean I disagree with you. It can mean there's no money in this budget, or the law won't let me do that, or not in this political cycle. Each of those is a different problem with a different solution. If you can hear the real constraint behind the no, you can often reshape your ask into something that fits, and turn the no into a yes. And here's something almost everyone misses. Behind every elected official sits an administrative layer, civil servants, technical experts, program managers. These are the people who draft the fine print, run the programs, and quietly decide what's feasible and what isn't. They're permanent. Politicians come and go. Winning over a sympathetic official can matter just as much as winning the minister, sometimes more. So treat them as serious allies, learn their names, respect their expertise. Never dismiss just the staff. Finally, timing. And this might be the single most powerful idea in this whole video. Policy moves through a cycle. First, the agenda gets set, then the rules get drafted, Then a decision is made, then it's implemented, then it's evaluated. The very same idea lands completely differently depending on where in that cycle you show up. Arrive at agenda setting, and you can help shape the question itself. Maximum influence. Arrive after the decision is made, and you're just commenting on the result. Minimum influence. Strategic timing is a genuine superpower. Learn when the window is open and walk through it then, not 6 months too late. Beyond the one-to-one meeting, there's collective influence. And this is where your impact really scales from one good outcome to lasting change. Public dialogue formats, town halls, youth policymaker panels, structured consultations, citizens' assemblies are powerful, but only when they're designed, not improvised. A badly run town hall is just noise that lets everyone tick a box and change nothing. A well-designed one has a clear purpose, a balanced mix of voices in the room, not just the loudest. And above all, a concrete output. Commitments made, next steps agreed, and a written record of who said they'd do what. Designed for the outcome, not just the conversation. Negotiation is part of all this, and it's nothing to be afraid of. Influence is rarely all or nothing. If you walk in knowing your priorities, what you absolutely need versus where you can flex, you can reach an outcome both sides can carry forward and defend. Maya might not get the full budget this year, but she might get a pilot, a commitment to review, and a youth seat at the table. A workable partial win that builds momentum almost always beats a perfect demand that gets a polite no and goes nowhere. And finally, let's reclaim a word that makes a lot of people flinch: lobbying. Forget the image of cigars and brown envelopes. Lobbying, properly understood, is simply sustained, organized advocacy for a cause, and it is a legitimate, regulated, and ethical practice. It's how charities, unions, patient groups, and yes, youth organizations make their case. Done ethically, lobbying means being transparent about who you represent, honest with your evidence, respectful of the rules and registers that govern it, and persistent over the long haul. That is not a dirty trick. That is exactly how organized civil society makes its voice count, year after year, vote after vote. Reframing lobbying this way matters, because it means you can do it openly, proudly, and with confidence, instead of feeling like you're doing something you should hide. Let's come right back to where we started. That gap between saying something and changing something. Between the protest on the left and the quiet meeting on the right. You now know how to cross it. Treat dialogue as a genuine institutional necessity, legitimacy, trust, better decisions, not a symbol. Know when to protest, when to consult, and when to build dialogue, with reciprocity, accountability, and continuity. Use the EU Youth Strategy and the EU Youth Dialogue as your structure and your backing. Know who governs the process. And remember that the local door and the national working group are open to you right now. Lean on Erasmus Youth, CERV, and the intermediary organizations that exist precisely to help you. Understand how policymakers really think, their competences, their constraints, their timing. Prepare with a clear objective and translate your experience into policy language. Get access through both formal and informal doors. Run focused meetings, follow up in writing, and sustain the pressure ethically over time. Because the goal was never just to be heard. Being heard is the beginning. The goal is to change what institutions actually do, to turn your lived experience into proposals that create real, measurable impact, like a reopened youth center that wouldn't exist if you'd stayed quiet. That is the difference between expression and influence. You've got the map, and you've got the tools. Now go and use them.